In the middle of a cracked dirt yard, Kaya, a 20-year-old Apache woman, is facing the deepest humiliation of her life. Her bare legs are pulled tight by a rough rope, and blood seeps out, darkening the dust beneath her feet. Her stepfather, his face hardened by alcohol and hateful prejudice, grips a leather whip and pants for breath. "You think you can get away from me, you savage," he roars, spitting on the ground before swinging the whip. The snap of leather against flesh cracks through the air, tearing her coarse cloth shirt and leaving dark bruises spreading across her strong shoulders. Kaya clenches her teeth until her lip bleeds, her eyes burning with defiance, even as her body is on the verge of collapse. The crowd around them watches with cold indifference, treating her pain like midday entertainment under the scorching sun. Just as the stepfather raises the whip for a final, crushing blow, the tall shadow of a horse suddenly blocks the harsh sunlight. Jake Harlan, the rancher known as the Desert Silence, reins in his horse, his steel, gray eyes locking onto the brutal scene. He does not ask questions and needs no explanation. He dismounts in silence, danger hanging thick in the air. Jake's calloused hand tightens around the grip of his gun, his jaw set, a silent declaration of war against everyone standing on the dark side of cruelty. It is great to have you here. If you feel comfortable and interested in this story, please subscribe to the channel so we can see each other again. The stepfather lowers the whip, squinting his bloodshot, alcohol-soaked eyes at the newcomer. "Harlan, this is my family business. Get out of here before I let you taste some lead," he hisses through yellowed teeth. The crowd starts to murmur, but with just a brief glance from Jake, the space falls into a heavy silence, like the moment before a storm breaks. Jake Harlan does not respond. His face, a hard mix of sharp bone structure and weathered, sunburned skin, remains cold and unmoved, like solid rock. He walks slowly toward the wooden post, his boots striking the dry ground in steady, deliberate beats. When he is only a few steps away, Jake suddenly pulls a razor-sharp hunting knife from his belt. A dry, metallic click cuts through the midday heat, cold and threatening. Without sparing a glance at the drunk man's trembling gun, Jake swings the blade. In one clean, decisive cut, the rough rope tightening around Kaya's ankle snaps apart. The exhausted body of the 20-year-old woman collapses like a rotten log, but Jake is already there, catching her with his strong arm. Kaya looks up at him, her deep black pupils filled with panic and distrust, like a trapped animal backed into a corner. Blood from her ankle and the whip marks on her shoulders darkens the dust at her feet. Jake says nothing. He bends down, lifts her lean yet solid body, as if she weighs no more than a sack of grain, and tosses her onto the saddle of his waiting Mustang horse. "You will pay for this, Harlan," the stepfather screams in helpless rage as Jake swings up into the saddle. Jake only tightens his jaw, his steel, gray eyes sweeping over the crowd one last time in a silent warning. No one is to touch this woman again. He snaps the reins. The horse neighs and bolts away from the Dust End way station. Red dust rises into thick clouds, swallowing the curses behind them. Under the scorching Arizona sun, sand covers the trail of blood, stretching long like an unhealed wound across the desert itself. Jake drives the horse straight toward the barren rocky ridges, where his isolated ranch lies hidden, leaving behind the hell of abuse and beginning a journey even he does not know the destination of. The Mustang horse takes long, heavy strides across the scorching sand of the Arizona desert, each pounding hoof kicking up thick clouds of red dust that blur everything behind them. Jake Harlan grips the reins tightly with one hand, while the other holds firmly around Kaya's small yet strong body to keep her from slipping off the saddle. Under the punishing western sun of 1885, sweat and dried blood begin to mix on the young woman's bronze-toned skin, creating a sharp, raw scent that speaks of brutal survival. Kaya does not lie still like a piece of property. After the dizziness of being rescued fades, the survival instinct of a cornered animal surges back to life. She struggles weakly, her breathing fast and panicked in the fire, hot wind. Her deep black eyes lock onto the weathered, stone-still face of this stranger. Inside her, only bitter suspicion remains. Is this just a new master, someone who bought her life with a hunting knife? She whispers in a hoarse, thirst-cracked voice. Where are you taking me? Please, leave me here. Do not make me suffer more humiliation. Jake still does not answer. He is called the Desert Silence because he knows that in this wasteland, words are often cheap and far less trustworthy than actions. He only glances at her once. His steel, gray eyes briefly reveal a distant sadness, the look of a man who has lost everything, before he urges the horse onward toward the barren, rocky ridges glowing bronze along the horizon. They ride through deep canyons, where the wind howls through stone cracks, like the moans of forgotten souls buried in sand and dust. The deeper they go into the wilderness, the heavier the silence between them becomes, until only the sound of heartbeats and hooves scraping against gravel remains. Kaya feels the steady warmth of Jake's chest through the old jacket he has draped over her blood-streaked shoulders. It is not a possessive touch, but one marked by quiet respect, stopping her in startled disbelief. At last, as the sun begins to sink behind the burning red horizon, Jake's isolated ranch appears like a small fortress standing firm against the desert storms. Jake stops the horse and lifts Kaya down gently, as if carrying a fragile soul returned from the edge of death. He looks into her wary eyes and speaks in a low, rough voice, like aged wood grinding in the wind. You are safe now. Here, no one has the right to define your worth ever again. Kaya stands still in the vast wilderness, where for the first time in 20 years, she no longer hears the crack of a leather whip, only the prairie wind whispering like a promise of peace. The first night at Jake Harlan's ranch passes in a strange kind of quiet, with no drunken shouting from her stepfather and no stench of cheap alcohol in the air. The next morning, as pale golden sunlight begins to cut through the dry desert haze, Kaya wakes beneath a warm animal hide blanket. She quickly realizes she is not locked inside a dark cell, as she had feared at first. Instead, Jake has given her a thick canvas tent, firmly set up against the rock wall behind the main cabin. What stuns Kaya the most is a simple but solid wooden latch Jake has installed on the inside of the tent entrance. He has kept his word about respect. This is a space he will never cross without permission. Stepping outside on her still, swollen feet, she sees a steaming bowl of corn soup placed on a flat stone by the entrance, along with a full water flask and several crushed desert herbs meant to soothe the fresh whip wounds on her skin. In the distance, Jake Harlan patrols the edges of his land in silence. His tall figure stands sharply against the sunlit sky, one hand always steady on his rifle, like a bronze sentinel guarding this newly born peace. He does not approach her, nor does he bark orders. Whenever their eyes accidentally meet across the sandy yard, Jake simply gives a slight nod before turning away to continue repairing fences and tending to his Mustang horses. The silence of this rancher does not feel threatening. Instead, it feels like a safe space where Kaya can finally breathe again. For the first time in many years, she does not tense up, waiting for a sudden blow. She spends the entire afternoon sitting by the water trough, watching how Jake works, slow, steady, and disciplined. The invisible boundaries Jake has set are not meant to imprison her, but to separate her from the painful past beyond this land. In the air, filled with the scent of dry grass and sun-warmed stone, Kaya begins to realize that this isolated ranch is not just a temporary shelter. It is slowly becoming a true stronghold, a place where the fear inside her starts to give way to a quiet, uncertain curiosity about the man known as the Desert Silence. The Arizona desert night falls like a thick, black blanket, bringing a sudden cold that stands in sharp contrast to the scorching heat of the day. Inside the wooden cabin, a flickering oil lamp throws trembling shadows across the walls. Kaya quietly slides the latch and steps out onto the porch, her bare feet feeling the fine sand now cooled and gentle. She sees Jake Harlan sitting alone on the steps, one hand holding a cup of cold coffee, the other absent-mindedly resting on an old wooden picture frame laid across his knees. Jake does not turn around, but he knows she is there. The silence between them no longer carries the threat of their first day. Instead, it feels like shared space, a place where both of them can breathe. Kaya steps closer, her deep black eyes drawn to the faded photograph, the image of a woman and a young boy smiling together. "My wife and my son," Jake says at last, his voice low and rough, like gravel rolling at the bottom of a well. 10 years ago, I could not protect them when a hostile native group attacked my old ranch. I have lived like a ghost ever since, just running from the smell of smoke and the sound of my own screams." Kaya sits down a short distance away, close enough to speak, far enough to feel safe, wrapping her arms around her knees. For the first time, she lets her guard drop, allowing her softness to show instead of that hardened strength. "My tribe cast me out too," she whispers, her voice as light as wind brushing past cactus spines. "They called me a bad omen because of the mixed blood in my veins. And my stepfather, he treated me like property, like a slave he could use to pour out his drunken rage." Under the silver moonlight, Jake turns to look at her. His steel-gray eyes, usually cold and distant, now hold a bitter understanding. He sees the whip scars across Kaya's strong shoulders and realizes they are not only carved into her skin, but burned deep into her soul, just like the invisible scars inside his own heart. "Here," Jake says firmly, pressing his calloused hand against the wooden floor. "No one gets to call you a burden or a curse ever again." Silence settles over the isolated ranch, but this time it carries the warmth of trust beginning to grow. Kaya nods gently, a faint smile touching her lips, the smile of a soul that has finally found a hand willing to hold on in the middle of the desert storm. They are no longer a rescuer and the rescued, but two broken souls slowly learning how to heal each other. The March sun pours harsh light over the corral, where sand begins to dance under the swirling winds of Arizona. The wounds on Kaya's shoulders and ankle have closed, leaving behind faint red scars, traces of an old hell, but now they stand as proof of a stubborn will to survive. She stands on the cabin porch, quietly watching Jake Harlan disassemble and clean his Winchester rifle. She no longer wants to be someone who stays behind a latched door. She wants the strength to protect the very boundary of safety this man has given her. "Teach me," Kaya says. Her voice no longer trembles. It is firm now, hard like cooled steel. Jake stops what he is doing and looks into her deep, black eyes. He understands that look. It is the hunger of a soul that never wants to be tied to a post or feel a whip again. He says nothing, only rises slowly and gestures for her to follow him toward the rock wall behind the cabin. At the shooting range, Jake sets tin cans along a rotting wooden fence. He places the heavy rifle into her sun-browned hands. "A gun is not just for shooting. It is an extension of your will," Jake says quietly. His calloused hands adjust her stance, pressing the stock firmly into the hollow of her shoulder to absorb the recoil. "Your breath is the soul of the shot. When your heart goes still between two beats, that is when you command the bullet." The sharp crack of the rifle echoes off the rock face. Her first shot flies wide, but Kaya does not flinch. The instincts of an Apache woman begin to rise within her. She learns to feel the wind brushing across her skin and to reload with surprising speed. After a week, she can hit targets from a distance that even Jake comes to respect. But Kaya does not seek strength only from the white man's firearms. When Jake patrols the land, she quietly slips deep into the canyons, searching for flexible yew wood and dried animal sinew. Guided by memories from her days with the tribe, she crafts her own Apache bow and razor, sharp, copper-tipped arrows. One afternoon, Jake returns and freezes in place when he sees Kaya standing atop a high rock, her silhouette sharp against the blazing red sunset. She releases the string. The arrow tears through the air and slams into the center of a rotting log about 160 feet away, which is about 50 meters, with terrifying force. In that stance, Jake no longer sees a victim in need of rescue, but a warrior being reborn from the ashes. The silence between them now carries a new meaning, the respect of two people standing on the same side. They do not speak of revenge, but both understand this truth. On this land of dust and stone, freedom belongs only to those brave enough to grip a weapon and hold on to it. Spring in Arizona brings waves of scorching wind, sweeping red dust around the wooden fence posts that Jake and Kaya have just reinforced. Just as life at the ranch is settling into a rhythm built on trust, an unfamiliar sound echoes from the canyon. Rapid, heavy, steady hoofbeats. A sound people on the frontier always recognize as a warning of danger. Jake Harlan is checking the hooves of his Mustang horse when he freezes, his steel-gray eyes narrowing toward the horizon. From the dusty haze, 4 riders emerge. At the front is Kaya's stepfather, his face swollen with alcohol and hatred. Behind him ride 3 men in long leather coats, 6 shooters hanging loose at their hips, their eyes sharp with the look of men who hunt other men for a living. They rein in their horses at the ranch gate, crooked smiles forming beneath patchy gray beards. The stepfather roars, his voice thick with tobacco smoke. "Harlan, you think you can hide that girl forever. She is my property, and I am here to take her back." Jake rises slowly to his feet and drapes the hand towel over the fence. He steps onto the porch, the Winchester already resting easy in his hands. His shadow stretches long across the sand, solid as a stone pillar. "There is no property here," Jake answers, his voice low and steady, like thunder before a storm. "Only free people." One bounty hunter, a long scar running down his cheek, steps forward. His eyes lock onto Jake's face before he suddenly breaks into a cruel laugh. "Free? Are you talking about yourself, Captain Harlan? Or should we call you a deserter wanted for killing your commanding officer during the Gila Valley massacre?" The words fall like a hammer, freezing the air. The past Jake has buried is dragged into the open. He is the soldier who fired on his own superior to stop a brutal war crime against the Apache, and the price on his head now stands at hundreds of dollars. The bounty hunter tosses a paper sketch of Jake into the red dust, his voice dripping with venom. "Hand over the girl, and turn yourself in. If not, we will burn this place to the ground, just like the army always does." From behind the wooden door, Kaya stands motionless, her hand gripping the Apache bow she crafted herself. She watches Jake's broad back, the man who saved her, the man she now realizes carries scars just as deep as her own. The hunters begin to spread out, forming a tightening circle. Sunlight flashes off cold gun barrels, a clear sign that this isolated ranch is about to become a battlefield soaked in blood. The Arizona desert night is terrifyingly quiet. Bitter cold begins to creep through the cracks in the rock walls, the complete opposite of the furnace, like heat of the day. Inside the cabin, an oil lamp casts a weak yellow glow across the weathered face of Jake Harlan. He silently checks the last of his bullets, his calloused hand sliding slowly along the cold barrel of the Winchester. Jake knows the bounty hunter was not bluffing. The wanted price on Captain Harlan is worth more than the lives of 10 cowboys put together. He turns to Kaya, who is sitting nearby, sharpening her copper-tipped arrows. "Listen," Jake says, his voice low and rough, heavy like stones rolling into a deep ravine. "When the moon goes down, take the Mustang horse, Grab these dry rations and ride north into the canyon range. I will go out and turn myself in. They want my head in this land. If I am gone, they will have no reason to hunt you anymore." Kaya freezes. Her sun-browned hands tighten around the grip of her Apache bow. She looks up at him, her deep black eyes no longer filled with the panic of someone bound and helpless, but burning with steady resolve. She rises slowly to her feet, her tall, strong frame casting a shadow on the wooden wall like a warrior carved from stone. "I watched my mother burn alive because she chose to stay and protect the truth," Kaya says. Each word hard and cold like tempered steel. "You did not save me so I could run away again. I am no longer the girl tied to a post at Dust End, left for the sun to judge. I am your companion. If you walk out there alone, you are not just giving up your life. You are stealing the trust I have only just found." Jake looks at her. His steel-hard gaze, usually so controlled, flickers with emotion. He realizes he is no longer protecting a broken-winged bird. He is standing before a true warrior, reborn from the ashes of humiliation. "They will kill both of us, Kaya," Jake warns, but the force behind his words has faded. "Then we will die as free people," Kaya says, stepping closer and placing her strong hand on his shoulder. The touch is filled with loyalty and unshakable commitment. They say nothing more. In the desert darkness, two souls once rejected by the world make their final choice. There will be no surrender and no solitary escape. They begin reinforcing the windows, setting sand traps around the fence, and preparing for a fight where the cost may be blood, but the reward is eternal dignity. As dawn begins to bleed along the horizon, the desert silence and the Apache woman warrior stand back to back, ready to face death itself. Before dawn can even break, the ground begins to tremble under the pounding of hooves, hammering against the canyon walls, strong and steady like war drums. From the porch, peering through the gaps between the reinforced planks, Jake Harlan sees red dust rolling with the wind, swallowing the ranch entrance in a choking haze. At the head of the bounty hunters rides Kaya's stepfather, his vicious face half hidden beneath the brim of a dust-caked hat. "Harlan, hand the girl over." His roar rips through the stillness. "She belongs to me, and you are a deserter with nowhere left to run." Jake does not answer with words. He tightens his grip on the Winchester, the cold steel barrel catching the pale light of early morning. Beside him, Kaya is no longer the girl tied to a post. She stands tall, muscles tense as she straps the leather guard around her arm, her other hand locked around the Apache bow she crafted herself. Her dark eyes burn with the fire of a warrior who has chosen to stay and defend her home and the man standing with her. The gunfight erupts when one of the hunters hurls a jar of kerosene into the horse corral. Flames explode upward, dry hay igniting as thick black smoke billows into the air. Jake fires again and again, each shot from his Winchester a hard declaration that this land will not be taken. As smoke and fire blur the enemy's vision, Kaya slips out onto the porch like an Apache ghost. She does not use a gun. Her copper-tipped arrows tear through the air from hidden angles, dropping the men who try to rush the fence. A bullet grazes Jake's shoulder, blood soaking into his shirt, but he does not falter. When the stepfather makes a reckless charge toward the porch, Kaya is already there. She does not flee like she did at Dust End. She raises her bow, her gaze steady and unbroken. The arrow slams into his upper arm, knocking the gun from his hand and tearing a scream from his throat. Faced with such fierce resistance, and realizing the two defenders are standing back to back, impossible to break apart, the bounty hunters panic. They drag their wounded and retreat into the rising wall of sand carried in by the coming storm, leaving behind a scorched ranch and the heavy stench of gunpowder in the air. Jake lowers his rifle, breathing hard, and looks at Kaya standing in the yard, her broad shoulders coated in ash, but her eyes blazing with pride. They have won this night, not only with weapons, but with the will of people who no longer know fear, because they have finally found something worth living for. The gun smoke slowly thins, giving way to the sharp stench of burned pine and smoldering hay under the pale morning light of Arizona. Dawn bleeds along the horizon, washing the ruins of the ranch in deep red, a place that has just witnessed a brutal fight to the death between hunters and two unbreakable souls. Jake Harlan stands on the scorched porch, his left shoulder soaked dark with blood, his calloused hand still gripping the Winchester, now cold and silent. Beside him, Kaya stands straight as a stone pillar, her Apache bow slung across her shoulder, her deep black eyes holding none of the panic she once knew. They have won the fight, but both understand this land is no longer a secret. They will come back, Jake says, his voice low and heavy, like rocks rolling into a deep ravine. This time, it was bounty hunters. Next time, it could be the army. Now that they know Captain Harlan is alive, they will not leave us alone. Kaya looks at the wooden cabin, the place where she first learned what safety and respect truly mean. She feels no regret. She takes a half-burned torch from the fallen enemy's hand and meets Jake's gaze with the resolve of a true warrior. "Let the dust erase every trace," she says. "We do not need wooden walls to feel safe. Home is where we stand together." By Kaya's decision, they set fire to what remains of the broken Mesa Ranch. Flames roar upward, consuming the cabin and the chains of a painful past. Jake silently tosses his old military dog tag into the blaze, a final act of surrender to a world of injustice he once served. They mount their horses and drive the two Mustangs hard toward the horizon. At that very moment, a massive sandstorm rises from the desert, blinding and violent, as if it means to swallow the entire valley. It is not disaster, but the curtain of fate. Jake and Kaya ride side by side and vanish into the storm, leaving behind the ashes of a former life. They are no longer a wanted man and a victim. They have become a legend of freedom in the heart of the Old West. The story of the desert silence and the Apache woman warrior will be carried on the desert wind as proof that true strength does not live in the grip of a gun, but in loyalty and the courage to write a new beginning together from the ashes. Many years later, as towns rise and fade across the lands of Arizona, people still whisper about the two figures who vanished into that sandstorm, not because of how many enemies they killed, but because of how they refused to become victims of fate. Jake and Kaya never chased glory. They chose to leave while victory was still warm, because they understood a lesson the frontier rarely teaches. Freedom is not about holding on to a piece of land. It is about holding on to the right to choose your own path. On their new journey, Kaya is no longer defined by bloodlines or scars. She learns to name her fear and then walk straight through it. From someone once tied to a wooden post, she becomes the one who sets boundaries for herself and for the world around her. Jake, who once believed silence was the only way to survive, relearns how to listen and how to trust. He comes to understand that protection does not mean control, and love does not require possession. Their story leaves behind a simple but lasting message. Violence breeds violence, but courage creates choice. No one has the right to define a person's worth based on origin, gender, or the past. Safe boundaries begin with respect, and only when people dare to stand up for those boundaries does the world grow quieter of its invisible whips. The winds of the Old West keep blowing, carrying old legends with them. But somewhere, along an open horizon, two people once pushed into a corner chose to walk side by side, not to run away, but to live honestly. And that is the final lesson. Freedom is not given. It is built step by step, with courage, responsibility, and compassion. The story you have been listening to contains fictional elements and is recreated with the support of artificial intelligence. Please listen with your own judgment and personal reflection. These fictional details are not meant to alter history, but to recall the spirit of the Old West, a place where people lived under harsh conditions, faced difficult choices, and accepted the cost of those choices. Through this story, I only hope to share a few meaningful lessons about compassion, love, and courage, values that still matter even as time moves on. My friend, please take good care of your health. We are not young anymore. Do not stay up too late. Let me know what time it is, where you are right now. And please subscribe to the channel so that tomorrow we can meet again. Best Wild West Love Stories.